Hello and welcome back to this random table where I fix stuff. Today, as you can see, I finally shelled out for Burroughs Class 1. This is a Style 3, and actually you can see the serial number down there. It says 5894S. I'm not sure what the S means. Has like the older style logo, Burroughs adding machine. Part of it's rubbed off, but I think later machines just said Burroughs right across the glass. So we're going to see if we can get this machine working here. I think this is definitely one of the coolest looking mechanical calculators with the glass sides and everything. And it just takes up a huge amount of space. It's so tall. And if that's not enough space, it does have this little table that folds out the sides, so it can take up even more space if that's what you want. This little flip up thing here. So, it is a little bit sticky. That one's okay. Some of the keys are a bit sticky. These things don't always work either. These are the column clearers. It is missing one key here, and I think this repeat key is a replacement because you can see the total and the error are the old style metal keys, but the repeat is a plastic one, so that might be a replacement. It's got the cast iron base, of course, and I think this is cast iron as well, this frame here that the glass sits in. And this top plate is actually covered in felt. This green stuff is felt, not actually painted like most calculators. And I think that Burroughs was the first one to use the green key plate with the black surround, which a lot of other machines copied later on. So that the Monroe did the same thing. And also the Class 3, and I think the Freedom Model F was also that way, and then some modest machines had the same thing, the green key plate with the black surround. But as far as I can tell, this is the first, Burroughs Class 1 was the first machine to do that. That was kind of interesting. Of course, this is the one where you can't see what is printing as it prints because the printing mechanism is all the way down on the back behind the machine. So anyway, we're going to see if we can get this working today, or over the next how many more days it takes. Just for comedic effect here, we'll compare it to a modern piece of technology, the bendy pad, which actually can almost fit underneath the front, but then it hits the cast iron dips down lower underneath, so it hits that, but it almost slide under the front, whatever you want to call that, in between the front legs. So this is definitely a very space-consuming machine, not like footprint-wise. It doesn't have a large footprint. It's just very tall. So volumetrically, I think it takes up more space than most other machines. The bendy pad wants to. I don't know, this fits under that way too. Anyway, let's get this thing opened up. This is the back side here, and I almost forgot to mention what it came with. This is the crank that came separately, and this is the paper holder, and it came with this note. You read that. So basically what it says is that it's going to go on here, and then these two screws are going to hold it in, so it's nicer than to take that off so it doesn't get damaged in shipping. So the first thing to get this open is we have to, I'm not sure if you can see down here, this lever goes inside the machine, and that's the paper advance. So every time the machine pushes on that lever, it's going to advance the paper. You can see the pattern spinning there. So we have to unhook this spring, which should allow this to fall back and stay back, and it does. Of course, we'll lift this out of the way. Got to look down there. So this is actually the ribbon. These used a very specialized ribbon, this super wide ribbon here. So I'm going to have to see what we can come up with for that. And if you look down there, you can see that pretty much everything is, free of the case here, so we should be able to take it off. Let's go back around to the front. These machines have a lock here, and this shaft goes into like a hook thing that hooks onto the front of the case right here. I don't have the key to open it, so what I'm going to try and do is lift this up and then see if I can get the back end of my knife in there to, it needs to be a bit longer than that, to, there we go, pop that. slide a screwdriver in so it doesn't pop back down. Now, hopefully, I should be able to lift this off. Maybe. Caught anything back here? I don't think so. Oh no, it's caught on this. This has to. The lip of this gets caught underneath the bottom. So we can lift this up. And there we go. This is very heavy. Some of these glass panes are cracked, so we'll have to make sure we don't lose any pieces. Anyway, now we are inside. We can take a little look around. So these things in the front here, I think are the stops. If I push a key, see how that pulls that in? See the three pulls that in? Like 1, 2, see that going back and forth there. This is kind of sticky. Anyway, I'm going to take a look around here. You got our register down in the front there. See one side. This is where the crank goes in. See our spring set up back there. And up here, all the rods that go from the keys down to the little hooks in the front there. And the other side, there's our dampener. It's like a nice cast piece there. There does seem to be, quite a bit of empty space in here. See, this right here is a big empty space, and then down underneath under there is also kind of an empty space. It's kind of interesting. Here's our printers back here, and then our ribbon, a special wide ribbon. So hopefully I can spray some WD-40 on this and it'll come back, because I'm not sure where else I would get a replacement ribbon for that at. Anyway, I'm going to start taking a look at what is stuck and not stuck and what I can get free, and go from there. See if I can take this keyboard off maybe to free up some of the stuck keys. So we'll see what we can do. As you can see, the keyboard came off pretty easily. There's just 4 screws, 1 in each corner, and then I took off the repeat, error, and total keys. The error gave me a bit of a problem, as you can see now. That's because this is bent over a little bit. As you can see that, but you look at it there, it's bent slightly to the left, so I didn't want to come out of its hole in the key plate, so I'll see if we can bend that back. And then the keyboard itself is just, a bunch of pins on the bottom with keys on the top, and most of them are pretty loose. Not sure if these will come out. I don't think so, because you can see that the felt is riveted down. It looks like those rivets go all the way through and come out the back side. So I don't think this is going to come apart. If you look down the end, you can, there's not enough space here. I can't turn it that way. There we go. If you look down the end, not sure if you can see it or not. White balance. But there's looks like a strip of metal that goes through and holds all the keys in. So, theoretically, maybe I could pull that out and clean up each key individually. Of course, then the problem is going to be getting them back in. It's not going to be a fun process, at least for like the metal rows. For the 9 row wouldn't be that bad, sliding that strip of metal back in, but for like the 5 rows, because it's all the way down, buried inside here. So, I'll see if I can clean these up somewhat and get all the keys free, but hopefully that won't be too bad. When this is off, you can look down in here and see these are what the keys press on. You push them down and they latch in, and then this thing clears it. So this is what those white and red buttons at the top push on. They push on, those are springy. They push on these things, and then the arrow key not only pushes on those, but also pushes these shafts back down. So you can see when I push this down, watch this piece here, it'll pop up. See it pop up there? And then when I push on this, it will release it. And if I push on the arrow key, it's going to bring this bar back down and push on that as well. See, it pushes this bar pushes on that. So that's why some of the keys clear with the arrow key, but not with these, because these just release the spring, which is, you know, just a very light spring, and that spring is not stiff enough to force against the stuck keys. But when you push on this bar is and forces the keys back up. So another thing that I find interesting is once you have a key down, you can't push any other keys in that row. It locks up the entire row. You have to clear, and then you can push the next key down. So that's very different. That's something I'm not used to. All the other calculators I've worked on, if you push down the wrong key, you can just push down the right one, and it will, you know, pop up the wrong one and push down the right one, or latch down the right one. But this one is not that way. You have to clear first, and then push down the right one. So that's interesting. The good thing is that these all seem pretty free for the most part. Well, that one doesn't, I guess. Actually, kind of does. This thing is just not working. If I release it manually, if I pull this up, you can see the structure of these. There's like, almost looks like a pair of pinchers or something. I push down the top one, and the bottom one comes up to meet it. And that's what unlatches it. You can see the bottom one, it's not a good camera angle, but you can see the bottom one actually grabs onto that bar. See the little tab right there that it grabs onto, and then when I lift it up, it releases. This one's not releasing for some reason. Actually, it seems like this is completely disengaged from that bottom part. So anyway, I'll have to look into that, but these definitely seem freer than the keys did, so I think the only stuck part there was the keys. I guess I could try running this through a cycle just to see what happens. You can see back down there is our spring, and then this is actually a cast rod that goes from this piece back to the crank on the spring thing, it looks like, and then all the way back down in the bottom there, and I'll show if you can see it or not, all the way down here. Right there is a super thick shaft, you know, almost like approaching car axle size thickness. You can see it down there. It's way overbuilt. But again, that's kind of what I think is cool about these old machines. And there's probably enough metal on that shaft to make like 5 modern smartphones. But anyway, let's just put the crank on this and see if we can at least run it through a cycle. So I guess you might want to watch it from this side, see what's going on. If anything is going to go on. So I think this crank just pops in, maybe. Actually, I'm not sure how it goes in. It's not going in. Alright, let me look at that for a minute. Alright, it's just really stiff to get in. There must be a really tight spring in that holds it in. But it's in now. So let's see what happens. And it locks up, of course. So that'll take some looking into, but it doesn't feel too stiff aside from that. So I'm not surprised. Usually that's what happens. There's something that sticks and then it won't return. So let me play with this for a minute and see if I can figure out what is stuck. So the way a lot of these machines work is that they have one shaft which is driven off the crank, and they have another shaft which is driven off of springs attached to the crankshaft. So basically, when you pull on the crank, the springs attached to the crankshaft pull the rest of the mechanism along with it. And the reason for that is because these machines have a dampener in them. So basically the dampener is attached to the shaft that's driven off the springs, so that way if you pull the handle super fast, the springs give some kind of like dampening, I guess, so that way you're not pulling directly against the dampener. The springs pull the rest of the mechanism along against the dampener. So you can pull this crank really fast, and then the springs will pull the rest of the mechanism along with it. And if you're pulling super fast, that just means the springs will stretch a little bit until the rest of the mechanism catches up. The problem with this machine is that the dampener was completely frozen. So when I pulled this handle, it went through the rest of its stroke, but the rest of the machine, driven off the springs, didn't move at all. And these machines have a catch on them so that if this handle gets to the end of the stroke before the rest of the machine does, there's a lock so that the handle won't return until the rest of the machine, driven by the springs, catches up to the crankshaft, and then once it all catches up, the catch will release and you can return the handle. But in our case, because the dampener was stuck, the rest of the machine never caught up, so that catch never released, and that's why the handle got stuck. So, if you want to release that, it's just a little catch all the way in the back there. Not sure if you can see it or not. It's going to be right here. So, yeah, you can see it coming up there. It's behind the spring. See that thing coming up there will come around, and then see now it just released because the rest of the mechanism caught up. But if it didn't, that catch there would hit against this piece right here, and all you have to do is pry it back a little bit, and then that will release the mechanism, and you can return the crankshaft to its home position if you need to do that. I've taken the damper out now, and I did manage to get it apart, although it was not easy to do. So this is the dampener body here. See, it has a shaft that goes through the bottom there to attach it to the mechanism. And then I have some extra pieces here. This is the main shaft that goes through it. This screws into a stationary shaft up at the top, up here. And then the bottom of the dampener attaches to the moving part of the mechanism. So basically it pulls the dampener down while the top of the shaft stays stationary. This is the top plate. You can see how nasty it was inside there. And this here is the piston. I'm just glad I setting in some oil because I had cleaned it with lacquer thinner, and I just wanted to make sure that no rust formed while it was sitting out completely clean of oil. So that's the piston, and then there's a nut that this shaft goes through the piston, and then the nut goes on the bottom to hold it on. So I was able to get this out. I took the shaft out of the dampener first, and then I tried turning the dampener to see if that would unscrew this end, but it actually just unscrewed the nut. So basically what I ended up having to do was grab this with pliers and turn it loose. And I managed to get it out of there. So I'm going to have to clean this up. The piston was the hardest to get out because it was all the way down in the bottom of the cylinder there. And because the nut had come off, there was nothing I could use to grab it. So basically what I ended up doing was soaking it in lacquer thinner. I poured lacquer thinner in here and then sloshed it around to try and dissolve most of the grease. And after I did that a couple times, then I just turned it upside down and tapped it a few times, and the piston finally came out. So hopefully this should be fine to put back together. I'll just put some new oil in it. This is the old 100-year-old oil that came out of it. So it's a much darker color than the oil I use. I'm not quite sure what kind of oil that is. It doesn't seem too viscous. It's pretty fluid there. In fact, I think this oil is a little bit more viscous than their oil, but I think it'll be okay. All that does is slow the mechanism down, so if you put too thick of an oil in, that just means that the mechanism will go a little bit slower. Not that this is super thick or anything. This is the same stuff that I put in the Burroughs Class 3, and that seems to be working just fine. So I think it should be fine to put in here. So let me put this back together, and then you can put it back in the machine. And also this just attaches to the top with 4 screws. This piece here just attaches to the top of the cylinder with 4 screws. So it wasn't too bad to take apart, it just that everything was stuck. So I took the screws out and then put a knife blade in between the base and the cap, and then just tap it a little bit and pop it apart. So I'll put this back together and then we can see how smoothly the machine operates with it in place. Okay, so the dampener is refilled and reinstalled. Now I notice if I pull the handle, and if I let go, it'll return nice and slow, instead of snapping back instantly like it would without the dampener. And if I pull the handle super fast, you'll be able to see what I'm talking about. So I'm going to pull it super fast and watch, it'll stay here for just like a second until the rest of the machine catches up, then it will release and return. See that? It paused for just a second until the rest of the machine caught up, and then it returned. Just didn't pull all the way up. So also the ratchet, if you don't pull it all the way, it won't do anything. You have to pull it all the way, then it will release. So, that seems to be working okay. So let's try and see if we can do some math on it here. The register is still pretty dirty yet. It's all the way down here on the bottom. If I can. So that's the register right there. So we'll see if we can do some math here. I'll do 1, 2, 3. It is all at 0, right? It is all at 0. So I'll do 1, 2, 3. Here goes my screwdriver. Looks like it says 1, 2, 3. Yeah, that's a 3. Very dirty 3. 1, 2, 3. I'll do 4, 5, 6. That will 4, 5, 6. And then 7, 8, 9. And we'll do 9, 8, 7. And 6, 5, 4. And 3, 2, 1. And we should end up with 3330, so that's correct. So it seems to be adding correctly. So, oh, by the way, these things here are the carry triggers, I think. So you notice this one's popped in because it triggered a carry from this column when I added the 1 the last time. But we should be able to pull an empty crank. So we'll reset the carry, and then we should be able to total. So I'll just push down total. And it clears it out. So that seems to be working. I think the next thing possibly to do would be to get some paper set up, and also go over everything. I've oiled most of the main shafts, but I haven't oiled quite everything on oil yet. So might do that next, and then put some paper in and make sure that the printer works okay. Also have to do something about this ribbon. See, this ribbon is a super wide ribbon. Instead of going horizontally in front of the printers like most ribbons do, this one goes vertically in front of the printers. So it has to be this wide because that's the width of all the printers down. It's the shafts down there, or the printer shafts. I don't think there's any kind of replacement I can get for this. So hopefully WD-40 will bring it back. That WD-40 seemed to work pretty well on the Class 3. I sprayed that with WD-40 I don't know, a couple months ago now, and it's still printing just fine. So hopefully there's enough ink left on here to bring this back and then do some printing. So remember when we're taking the keyboard off, the felt piece on the front came down over the front here, and I didn't realize that there were springs on these little hooks here that were attached to the keyboard. So 2 of them got stretched out like this because I didn't know they were there, so I didn't take them off. And then go on to this little piece here, which goes inside the keyboard. I'll show you that in a minute. So I replaced them, this one and this one. So they're a little bit longer. Hopefully they're not too long. If they are, we'll just figure something out once I have this back in. But this plate goes up inside the keyboard, like right up in there. And then the springs hook on these little hooks on the top. And in my opinion, that's a little overkill anyway, because these are held down by gravity. You can see that when I pull them up, they automatically swing back due to gravity. And what these are is these are the locks that release the sliders. So when you push a key down, see how it rotates forward? Why is it not clearing? Anyway, these are what release the slider, so that when you push a key down, it releases the slider so that the slider can slide down until where the key is. Because if you didn't have those in there, then the sliders would always slide down to 9, because then none of these hooks would be in there to stop them. So this stops them when you have no keys pressed. But like I said, gravity holds them in place, so the springs aren't really necessary, but I replaced the springs anyway, just you know, part of the overbuiltness of this machine. As far as the keyboard goes, the reason why some of the keys were stuck was because the felt had dried up and shrank in certain areas, so it was the actual felt here was squeezing the keys. So I've gone through and I've widened all the holes that were sticking so that all these keys should be pretty free now. Remember, this row, none of the keys moved at all, and now they're nice and free. And that plate goes up, this is the bottom here, goes up inside there, and the cutouts on it, see there's a cutout on either end and in the middle. Those cutouts go on the pegs, or go behind, I don't have no space here, go behind the, you can see up in there, there's a peg there, there's one there, and then there's one there. And those cutouts rest behind those pegs there. And then it goes on, you know, something like this, once it's all together. Actually, I could probably put it in like this, to give you an idea. So it goes on something like that. And then as you can see, this felt covers that up. So you actually have to lift the felt up to see those things, and I didn't notice them when I took it off, so that's why they got stretched. But this plate goes, I did have to take one row of keys out in order to, actually I probably can't get this in. No, I can't get it in now because of the repeat key here. So I will have to take that back off to slide this in. But that's why I had to take these keys out to get this out, because it wouldn't slide out without the keys coming out. So anyway, that's just something to watch out for when working on here. Okay, it comes off a little bit easier now. This clear key was bent a little bit, so I unbent it, and now the keyboard comes off much easier. That's how I got stuck coming off the first time. It was harder to get off because this was bent. But anyway, other than that, I think we are looking pretty good. Just about ready to go back together and give a test with the keyboard, I think. So I'm getting ready to put this keyboard back together here. I just have it setting on a screwdriver so it doesn't push all the keys back out, although that would be okay because just the one row is the row that's loose. You can see these are loose. And I just wanted to show how simple this assembly is. You just got these little posts with the keycaps on them. They have this slot in the middle, and through that slot just goes this little clip thing here, so it just goes, you know, in that way, and then has a little clip there to clip onto the last key so it doesn't fall out. So this is definitely a much simpler keyboard than the Class 3 and the Victor, the other machines there. It's really not that bad to work on, just this part. As far as the actual, if you had to take apart the part of the machine, like this is where the keyboard sits on. So I guess technically you could also count this as part of the keyboard. This would probably not be that fun to take apart, but parts wouldn't be that bad because there's just these shafts here that feed through, so you can put the shaft in, then put the spring on, and so forth. So probably wouldn't be that bad. Probably the hardest part would be on the bottom of these things. Are rods that go all the way down to the front here. So getting those hooked on will probably be the hardest part of that. But other than that, it's a pretty simple keyboard compared to the other machines. I should just slide in here now. You can see there's a side view there. Two other clips on there. So just, you can see, you should just slide right in. I'll have to get the clip on, but yeah, pretty simple, I think. This is definitely a much more pleasant keyboard to work on than the previous ones I've been working on. Okay, so you can see I've got the keyboard back on now. I think this machine is pretty much done. I did have to replace the ribbon. You can see that with the original ribbon, even with the WD-40, it still wasn't printing very well. So what I did was, actually I can show you what I did. So what I did was I just took 4 strips of regular typewriter ribbon and put them side by side here. They do overlap somewhat because it's not quite wide enough for all of them to sit side by side, but I think it'll work out just fine. You can see it definitely prints a lot darker and a lot more readable. There's some issues here, that might be because the ribbon's overlapping, I'm not quite sure, but I think it'll be okay. You don't really have much choice since I don't think there's any way you can get an actual replacement ribbon for this since it's such a strange ribbon. This machine was originally designed, I think, only about 10 years after typewriters were invented, so I don't think there was any kind of like standard ribbon at that time, so it's not really surprising that they just came up with their own ribbon. So anyway, I think that'll be good enough. The machine seems to work. So I've cleaned up the glass sides on the case, and I think I'm going to put this back together and then give it one more test. So before I put the cover back on here, I just wanted to show some of the insane overbuiltness of this machine. So this shaft down here, one that I can barely point to, that shaft is like 3/4 inch. So, that's like probably like smart card axle size. And all it does is just sit in the bottom of this calculator and rotate back and forth a little bit every time you pull the handle. This shaft right here is 1/2 inch. So definitely, way overbuilt. And that's one of the things I really like about these old machines. Nothing today would ever be that overbuilt. There's probably more metal in that shaft than there is in like 10 modern smartphones. So there's something cool that I wanted to point out about this machine. I've got the cover back on, and the crank is pretty simple to remove and insert actually. You can see it has this groove in it here, and the tail of a spring sits in there. And normally the handle's like this, with the spring, the tail of the spring like this, spring loaded in. And then to remove it, you just tilt it backwards, and you can see then the tail of the spring, focus. Well, we could have focus if the camera would cooperate. Focus on that, please. There we go. Anyway, so you turn it like this, and then that lifts the tail of the spring out, so then you can slide it out like that. Why is my camera broken today? Anyway, then to shove it back in, you just line it up, and then you just push it in like that. There's a lot of tension on that spring, so you have to give it a nice good shove to get it in there. But it's in there now. I did clean the glass. I'm going to go over it once more again now that it's back together. It's still got quite a bit of dust on it, but on the outside, hopefully. I did clean it off the inside, so it should just be the outside that's dirty now. And I think we can give it one more test, and that should be it. So there's one more thing over here I forgot to mention. This is the line counter. Every time you increase the, or you do a new line, this thing rotates. You can see it has numbers on the side of it. And when it gets all the way up here, you see it rings the bell. And then to reset it, you just release this and it snaps back. So it's kind of interesting. I'm not quite sure how useful that would have been, you know, back in the day. Because if you're using a roll of paper like I guess most people would have, I'm not really sure how this would help you. But anyway, this is an interesting feature here that I don't think I've seen on any other machines. So you can actually set your line spacing on this machine. That's this here. This pulls out and you can slide it over and it locks in 3 different positions. So 1, I'm missing 2, and then 3 line spaces. So just a little extra feature. Okay, I think we're ready for the final test here. So we'll just do our favorite addition. And that's the correct answer. So you see the total is locked now because it's a carry pending. You can see that by the one tab they're pushed in. So I'll do a blank crank and now it should be with the total. And get our results. Right, focus. This camera is broken today. There we go. It keeps turning autofocus off or something. Anyway, it works. I'm not quite sure why we got a smudge there, but prints out just fine and adds just fine. So I think that's going to be about it for this video. So Burroughs Class 1 is ready for its next 100 years. So hope you enjoyed this video, and thank you for watching.